The great meeting hall of Kepler-7 station buzzed with voices from across the galaxy. 12 different species sat around the massive circular table, their forms as varied as the worlds they came from. Some walked on 2 legs like the old humans. Once did. Others slithered or floated or clicked across the metal floors on 6 insect-like legs. Commander Thexville adjusted his breathing mask and checked the time on his wrist device. Another monthly trade meeting. Another day of listening. To the same arguments about who controlled which star systems and who got to mine which asteroid belts. He had been doing this job for 30 years. Every meeting felt exactly the same. The Zephyrians sat across from him, their purple skin gleaming under the station's bright lights. They were the strongest military force in the galaxy, and they never let anyone forget it. Their representative, a tall female named Zarinth, was speaking loudly about expanding their territory again. The Outer Rim systems need proper management, she said, her voice carrying the harsh accent of her people. My empire has the ships and the strength to bring order to those wild planets. A small, furry creature from the Velkan Republic squeaked in protest. Those systems belong to free traders. Cannot just take them because you have bigger guns. Zarinth laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Bigger guns are exactly why we can take them. That is how the galaxy works, little mouse. Sighed and made notes on his datapad. It's the same conversation every month. The strong took from the weak. The weak complained to the council. The council did nothing because the strong had too many votes. It was a system that had worked for thousands of years. Ever since the galaxy had been united under the Great Peace. He remembered learning about the old days in school. Before the Great Peace, there had been wars everywhere. Planets burned. Whole. Species died out, and the council was formed, and the strongest species agreed to work together instead of fighting each other. It had brought stability to the galaxy, of course. Some species had not wanted to join the Great Peace. They had fought against it. Most of them were dead now, their planets turned to glass and dust. The textbooks called it necessary corrections to maintain galactic harmony. Dexville had always thought that was a nice way of saying murder, but he kept such thoughts to himself. The humans had been one of those species. They had appeared in the galaxy about 1,000 years ago, spreading out from a small blue planet called Earth. At first, they seemed harmless enough. They traded with other species and kept to themselves mostly. But then they started asking uncomfortable questions. Why did the strong species get to make all the rules? Why did some planets have everything, while others had nothing? Why were the council meetings held in secret? The humans had wanted to change things to make the galaxy more fair for everyone. The council had been patient at first. They tried to explain to the humans how things worked. They offered them good trade deals and a small voice in galactic politics. But the humans kept pushing. They formed alliances with weak species. They shared technology with planets that were supposed to stay primitive. They talked about ideas like rights and freedom that threatened the natural order. So the council had voted. The humans were declared a threat to galactic peace. The Zephyrian Empire, always eager for a good fight, had volunteered to handle the problem. It took them 6 months to find every human world and colony. When they were done, the humans were gone. All of them. Their home planet Earth was nothing but melted rock and radioactive dust. That had been 847 years ago. Dexville knew the exact number because the Zephyrians celebrated it every year. They called it Correction Day and held parades on their home world. Most species in the galaxy had forgotten that humans ever existed. They were just another entry in the history books, another example of what happened to those who challenged the natural order. A soft beeping sound from his wrist device pulled Dexville back to the present. His sensors were picking up something strange at the edge of the star system. He frowned and checked the readings again. There were massive gravitational waves coming from empty space, the kind of disturbances that usually meant big ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel, but there were no ships scheduled to arrive today. The trade routes to Kepler-7 were carefully controlled. Nothing moved in or out without council permission. He tapped his device to get a clearer reading. The gravity waves were getting stronger, and they were coming from multiple directions. Whatever was out there, it was big. Very big. Excuse me, Dexville said, standing up from his seat. The other representatives looked at him with annoyance. Interrupting a council meeting was considered very rude. "Commander Thexfell," said the council chairman, an ancient creature that looked like a walking tree, "do you have something important to share with us?" "I am picking up unusual sensor readings from the outer system," Thexfell replied. "Large gravitational disturbances. Multiple contacts." Zaronth snorted. "Probably just asteroids or space debris. Your sensors are old, Commander. When was the last time you updated them?" Several representatives laughed. Thexfell felt his face burn with embarrassment, but he checked his readings one more time. Gravity waves were definitely there, and they were definitely not natural. "I think we should investigate," he said quietly. "We think you should sit down and let us finish our work," Zaronth replied coldly. "If there was anything dangerous out there, our ships would have detected it long ago. The Zephyrian Navy sees everything that moves in this galaxy." Thexfell wanted to argue, but he knew it was useless. The Zephyrians controlled the military. If they said there was no threat, then officially there was no threat. He sat back down and tried to focus on the meeting, but his eyes kept drifting. To his sensor readings, the gravity waves were still getting stronger. The gravity waves stopped. Commander Thexfell stared at his sensor display, confused. One moment the readings had been climbing higher and higher. The next moment, nothing. Just empty space and the normal background noise of the star system. He was about to dismiss it as a sensor malfunction when reality broke. Ships appeared. Not the gradual emergence from faster-than-light travel that every species used. Not the slow materialization of ships dropping out of hyperspace. These vessels simply existed where they had not existed a moment before, as if the universe had suddenly remembered they were supposed to be there. Thexfell's breathing stopped. His hands shook as he counted the contacts on his screen. Dozens of ships. Hundreds. They surrounded Kepler-7 station in a perfect sphere, each one exactly the same distance away. The formation was so precise it looked like mathematics made real. The ships themselves were wrong. Oh, that was the only word Thexfell could think of to describe them. They were sleek and dark, seeming to absorb the light from nearby stars instead of reflecting it. They had no visible weapons, no engine ports, no communication arrays. They looked more like living creatures than machines, all smooth curves and organic lines. "Alert! Alert!" Thexfell shouted, jumping to his feet. "Vessels have appeared in the system. Multiple contacts? We are surrounded." The council meeting erupted into chaos. Representatives leaped from their seats, some reaching for weapons, others activating personal shields. The chairman's tree-like form creaked as he turned toward the main display screen. "Show us," he commanded. Thexfell's shaking fingers worked his controls. The wall screen lit up with tactical displays showing the human ships in their perfect formation. Gasps and cries of alarm filled the room as the representatives saw what they were facing. "Impossible," whispered Zaronth, her purple skin turning pale. "Nothing can move that many ships without being detected. Our sensors watch every approach to this system." "Your sensors saw nothing because there was nothing to see," said a new voice. Everyone in the room froze. The voice had come from the communication speakers, but no one had opened a channel. It was speaking perfect galactic standard, the common language used for trade and diplomacy. The voice sounded human, but that was impossible. There were no humans left. "Who is this?" demanded the chairman. "Identify yourself immediately." "We are humanity," the voice replied calmly. "We have returned to reclaim what was stolen from us. You have 4 minutes to surrender unconditionally." The silence that followed was complete. 12 species, some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, sat frozen in their chairs like children caught stealing candy. Thexfell watched their faces change from confusion to disbelief to growing terror. Zara single quotes Nth was the first to recover. She stood up slowly, her hand moving to the weapon at her side. "This is some kind of trick. Humans are extinct. You made sure of that 800 years ago." 847 years, 2 months, and 16 days, the voice corrected. "We remember the exact time when your ships turned our world to glass. We remember everything." The Zephyrian representative laughed, but it sounded forced and nervous. "Even if some humans survived, they could never build a fleet like this. They were primitives when we destroyed them. They barely had space travel. You are correct, the voice agreed. When you murdered our world, we were still bound by the same laws of physics that limit you. We could not fight you with ships and guns and missiles, so we chose a different path. More ships appeared, not around the station this time, but throughout the galaxy. Vexvel's display showed reports flooding in from every major star system. Human vessels were materializing everywhere at once, always in the same perfect formations, always with the same impossible technology that made them appear. From nothing, the reports came faster than anyone could read them. Human ships over the Zephyrian homeworld, human ships in the Velkan trade routes, human ships surrounding every military base, every shipyard, every planet that mattered. In less than a minute, humanity had positioned itself to strike at every important target in the galaxy simultaneously. This is impossible, Zoranth said again, but her voice was smaller now. No one can coordinate attacks across the entire galaxy. The distances are too great. Communication alone would take years. You still think in terms of distance and time, the human voice replied. You still believe that space and matter are fixed things that cannot be changed. We learn differently. A new display appeared on the station's main screen without anyone activating it. It showed Earth as it had been before the Zephyrian attack. A blue and green world covered with cities and forests and oceans. Then the image changed, showing the planet as it was now. A dead ball of melted rock orbiting a star that no longer had children to call it the sun. When you destroyed our world, you thought you were ending our story, the voice continued. But death is not an ending for those who refuse to accept it. We spent 8 centuries learning to step outside the rules that bind lesser species. We studied the forces that hold atoms together and the spaces between stars. It became something more than what we were. Vexvel realized he was holding his breath. Around the table, the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat silent and still, listening to the voice of a species they had thought safely extinct. We watched you, the voice said. We saw how you divided our colonies among yourselves like prizes. We listened to your victory celebrations and your history lessons that painted us as terrorists and troublemakers. We recorded every injustice, every casual cruelty. Every time one of you said our extinction was necessary for galactic peace. The timer on the wall display changed to show 3 minutes and 30 seconds remaining. We offer you the same choice. You offered us, the voice concluded. Surrender now, and you will be allowed to live under our guidance. Refuse, and discover what total annihilation truly means. We have learned to be very thorough. Zaren's hand tightened on her weapon. You're bluffing. No matter what tricks you've learned, you can't fight the entire galaxy. We have billions of ships, trillions of soldiers. Even if you've become more advanced, you're still just one species. Are no longer just one species, the voice replied softly. We are what species become when they refuse to stay dead. You are about to learn the difference. The timer showed 3 minutes remaining. The timer reached 0. Nothing happened for exactly 3 seconds. Then the universe began to scream. Commander Vexvel watched his sensor display as the first ships died. It's not destroyed, not damaged, not broken apart by weapons fire. They simply stopped existing. One moment the Zephyrian patrol fleet near the station was there, 12 massive warships bristling with guns and shields. The next moment there was empty space where they had been, no explosions, no debris, no energy signatures. The ships had been erased from reality as if they had never been built. Report, shouted the chairman, his tree-like form shaking with fear. What happened to the patrol fleet? Vexvel's hands moved over his controls, but the sensors showed nothing to report. The space where 12 warships had been floating was completely empty. Not even dust remained. They're gone, he whispered. Just ... gone. Across the galaxy, the same thing was happening everywhere at once. Vexvel's communication board lit up with panicked messages from 1,000 different worlds. Military bases vanishing, battleships disappearing mid-flight, entire fleets ceasing to exist between one heartbeat and the next. The Zephyrian home fleet was the pride of their empire. 300 ships, including the massive dreadnought Earthbreaker, the vessel that had led the attack on humanity's world so long ago. Admiral Kethmer himself commanded from the bridge of that legendary ship, the same bridge where he had given the order to burn Earth. Vexvel, It watched the long-range sensors as the Earthbreaker moved to attack position. The massive ship's planet-killing cannon began to charge, the same weapon that had turned the human world to glass. Energy readings climbed higher and higher as the dreadnought prepared to fire. "Let's see how your tricks work against real firepower." Zarenth snarled from her seat at the council table. She was watching the same display, her purple face twisted with rage and desperation. The Earthbreaker fired. A beam of pure destruction lanced out from the dreadnought's main gun, carrying enough energy to crack a planet in half. The beam struck one of the dark human ships directly in its center. The beam passed through the ship like it was made of smoke. For a moment, nothing happened. The human vessel hung in space, completely unharmed. The massive energy blast that should have vaporized it had simply gone through it as if it were not really there. Then the Earthbreaker began to come apart. It did not explode, it did not burn. The atoms that made up the great ship simply forgot how to stick together. The hull became dust. The engines became gas. The crew became scattered particles drifting in the vacuum of space. In less than 10 seconds, the most powerful warship in the galaxy had been reduced to its basic elements. "No," Zarenth whispered, staring at the display in horror. "That's impossible. Matter doesn't work that way. Matter works however we decide." "It should work," came the calm human voice over the speakers. "We learned to rewrite the rules that bind atoms together. Your weapons cannot touch us because we exist partially outside the reality you understand." The slaughter continued across the galaxy. Human ships did not fight battles. They conducted executions. Fleets that had taken centuries to build vanished in seconds. Weapons that could destroy moons had no effect on the dark vessels that seemed to exist between dimensions. The hegemony's Grand Armada, 60,000 ships strong, tried to make a coordinated attack. Every ship fired at once, filling space with enough destructive energy to sterilize a solar system. The human ships absorbed the barrage without even slowing down. Then the Grand Armada simply stopped existing, all 60,000 vessels erased. From reality in a single moment, Dexfell felt sick as he watched the casualty reports pour in. Millions of ships. Billions of crew members. The combined military might of 12 species, built up over thousands of years, was being systematically deleted from existence. "Stop," screamed a small Velkin representative, tears streaming down her furry face. "Please stop. We surrender. We surrender." The human voice was quiet for a moment. When it spoke again, it sounded almost sad. "Surrender was offered 4 minutes ago. That time has passed. Destruction was not random." Dexfell began to see the pattern as more reports came in. The humans were targeting specific ships and specific fleets. They were destroying the vessels that had participated in attacks on human colonies. They were erasing the commanders who had celebrated humanity's extinction. They were removing the weapons that had been used to glass human worlds, but they were not killing everyone. Civilia. Ships were left untouched. Medical vessels continued their missions unharmed. Even some military units, the ones that had shown mercy to human refugees long ago, found themselves protected by the same technology that was destroying their allies. The humans were conducting a surgical removal of everything and everyone who had been involved in their genocide. They had kept records. They remembered every name, every ship, every world that had celebrated when Earth burned. Admiral Kethmer's final transmission came through the communication channels just before the Earthbreaker died. "How?" he gasped. "How did you survive?" "We made sure. We checked every world. We killed everyone." "You killed our bodies," the human voice replied gently. "But consciousness is not made of flesh and bone. When you forced us to choose between death and transcendence, we chose to become something that could never be destroyed again." On the station, Zarenth had fallen to her knees. A proud warrior species, the conquerors of 100 worlds, had just watched their entire military force cease to exist. "What are you?" she whispered. "We are what you made us," the voice answered. "We are what happens when a species decides that dying is less important than remembering. We are what grows from the ashes of worlds that refuse to stay burned." Timer on the wall display had changed. Instead of counting down to 0, It now showed how long the demonstration had lasted. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. In just over 4 minutes, humanity had erased the military power of 12 species and reduced the galaxy's combined fleets to scattered atoms. "The debt has been paid," the human voice announced. "Your crimes against humanity have been answered. In full, the galaxy's military strength has been reduced to approximately what it was when our species first achieved spaceflight. We consider this a fair reset." The most powerful beings in the galaxy sat in stunned silence, their faces showing the same expression he had seen on primitive animals. When they suddenly realized they were being hunted by something much larger than themselves, what happens? "Now," asked the chairman, his ancient voice shaking like leaves in a storm. "Now," the human voice replied, "we discuss the new rules." The air in the council chamber shimmered like heat rising from hot stone. Commander Thetzfeld felt his breathing mask fog up as something impossible began to happen in front of his eyes. Human was forming in the empty space. At the center of the room, she appeared slowly, like a picture coming into focus. First, just an outline of light, then colors filling in the shape, then finally, solid matter that looked real enough to touch. When the process finished, a woman stood before the council table, wearing simple clothes that seemed to be made of starlight. Itself, she looked exactly like the humans from the old history books. 2 arms, 2 legs, brown hair, dark skin. Gosh, but her eyes were wrong. They held depths that seemed to go on forever, like looking into space itself. When she moved, reality bent slightly around her as if the universe was making room for something that no longer followed its rules. "I am Captain Sarah Chen," she said in the same calm voice they had heard over the speakers. "I speak for humanity in all matters concerning this galaxy." Zaranth tried to stand, but her legs would not support her. She remained on her knees, staring up at the human woman. "You're supposed to be dead," she whispered. "All of you. We made sure." Da-da-da-da. Sarah Chen turned to look at her. When their eyes met, Zaranth made a small choking sound and looked away. "Death is a choice," the human said gently. "Chose differently." She raised her hand and something appeared in her palm. It looked like a book, but it was made of the same shifting light as her clothes. The pages seemed to contain writing that moved and changed as Thetzfeld watched. "This is our ledger," Sarah Chen announced to the room. "Every human life lost. Every colony burned. Every act of cruelty committed against our species has been recorded here with perfect accuracy." She opened the book and began to read. "Colony ship, New Hope, destroyed by Zephyrian interceptors, while carrying 12,000 civilians to a farming world. The attack was led by Admiral Kethmer. Duration of the slaughter, 6 hours. Number of survivors, 0. Zaranth flinched, as if she had been struck. "That was military action," she said weakly. "They were carrying weapons." "They were carrying farm equipment," Sarah Chen corrected without emotion. "Tools for planting crops and digging irrigation channels. Your ship's records are very detailed. You've read them all." She turned a page. "Research Station Bright Star. Eliminated by hegemony forces for refusing to share medical discoveries. The station was developing treatments for childhood diseases. 300 scientists and their families were spaced. The order was given by Commander Rixnell, because humans were keeping life-saving knowledge from their betters." The insect-like representative from the hegemony clicked his mandibles. Nervously, that was different. They were hoarding technology that could help everyone. "They were developing medicine to save children," Sarah Chen replied. "Your people wanted it to extend the lives of your already immortal ruling class. When they refused, you killed them all and took it anyway." She continued reading page after page of atrocities. Merchant ships destroyed for carrying human goods. Refugee camps burned for harboring human survivors. Entire worlds sterilized just to make sure no humans were hiding there. Each entry included names, dates, and the species responsible. The small Velkin representative was crying openly now. "Please stop," she begged. "We know what we did. We know it was wrong." Sarah Chen paused in her reading and looked at the furry creature with something that might have been kindness. "Velkin ships rescued human survivors whenever they could do so safely. Your homeworld offered sanctuary to refugee children. This is noted in our records as well. She turned to face the whole council. We do not blame all species equally. Some of you were active participants in our genocide. Others simply looked away while it happened. Few tried to help, but were too weak to make a difference. We have judged each according to their actions. A new hologram appeared in the center of the room, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Different star systems glowed with different colors: red for the Zephyrian Empire and other species that had led the attacks, yellow for those who had participated but not led, green for species that had tried to remain neutral, blue for the few worlds that had attempted to help humanity. This is your judgment, Sarah Chen announced. Red zones will be relocated to single star systems and forbidden from developing military technology. Yellow zones will be placed under direct human oversight. Green zones may continue as before, but with human observers. Blue zones will be granted expanded territory and technology sharing agreements. What about the Council? What about our government? The Council will continue to exist, Sarah Chen replied. But its decisions will be reviewed by human arbiters before implementation. No species will be permitted to attack another. No worlds will be allowed to starve while others hoard resources. No children will die from diseases that other planets know how to cure. Zeronth finally found her voice again. Cannot police the entire galaxy. Even with your new powers, you are still just one species. Sarah Chen smiled, and for a moment, she looked almost human again. We are no longer just one species. When we transcended physical death, we invited others to join us. Every human who died in your genocide was given the choice to return. Most chose to stay at peace, but many chose to come back for this moment. The hologram changed, showing human ships throughout the galaxy. Each ship contained the consciousness of humans who had died during the genocide, returned now as beings of pure thought and energy. We are the ghosts of everyone you murdered, Sarah Chen said softly. We are the children who never grew up, the parents who never saw their families again, the scientists who never finished their research, the artists who never completed their masterpieces. We came back to make sure it never happens again. She closed the ledger, and it vanished from her hands. The accounting is complete. The debt has been paid. Now we begin the work of gardening. Speaking for the first time since the human had appeared, Sarah Chen turned to him with those impossible eyes. A garden requires careful tending, Commander. Weeds must be removed. Nutrients must be distributed fairly. Strong plants must be prevented from choking out weaker ones. Left alone, gardens become wild and chaotic. She gestured to the galactic map still floating in the room. This galaxy proved too dangerous to leave unsupervised. It showed us what happens when the strong are allowed to prey on the weak without consequence. The human woman began to fade, becoming translucent, like a ghost. Your new assignments will be transmitted to your governments within the hour. Resistance will be met with the same efficiency you witnessed today. Cooperation will be rewarded with prosperity beyond your current imagination. Vanished completely, Sarah Chen looked directly at Zarinth. Your species destroyed our world 800 years ago. Today, we have become the gardeners of yours. I wonder which of us chose the wiser path. The council chamber fell silent, except for the soft sound of 12 species trying to understand their new place in a universe that no longer belonged to them. 6 months had passed since the day the galaxy changed forever. Commander. Dexful stood at the observation deck of Kepler 7 station, watching something that should have been impossible. In the distance, a dead star was coming back to life. Ancient red giant had burned out millions of years ago, leaving behind nothing but a cold, dark sphere of matter. But now, it glowed with new light. Not the nuclear fire of a normal star, but something cleaner and brighter. Human technology was rebuilding it from the inside out, turning dead matter into a source of endless energy. Magnificent, isn't it? Said a familiar voice behind him. Dexfell turned to see Sarah Chen materializing out of the air. She looked more solid now than she had during that first terrifying meeting. Her form no longer flickered between matter and energy. She had learned to stay in one shape, though her eyes still held those impossible depths. I don't understand how you do it, Dexfell admitted. How do you make a dead star burn again? Sarah Chen moved to stand beside him at the window. We convinced its atoms to remember what they used to be. Matter has memory, Commander. It remembers every state it has ever been in. We simply helped it choose to be a star again. Across the galaxy, similar transformations were taking place. Dead worlds were growing new atmospheres. Barren moons were sprouting forests that had never existed before. Asteroid belts were being reshaped into massive space habitats that could house billions of people. The humans were not just governing the galaxy, they were remaking it. The Zephyrian relocation is complete, Sarah Chen said, changing the subject. They have been moved to the Keth system as planned. Single star, 3. Small planets, no military shipyards? Thexville nodded. He had overseen part of that operation. Watching the proud Zephyrian Empire reduced to a handful of farming worlds had been strange. They had gone from galactic conquerors to simple farmers in the space of a few months. They adapting, he asked. Better than expected, Sarah Chen replied. Without the constant pressure to maintain military dominance, many of them are discovering talents they never knew they had. Zarinth herself has become quite skilled at growing food crops. The former Zephyrian representative was now a simple farmer on a backwater world, spending her days tending gardens instead of planning conquests. It was a fate worse than death for someone who had once commanded starfleets, but she was still alive. The humans had kept their word about mercy. What about the others? Thexville asked. The hegemony is learning to share their immortality treatments. With younger species, the Crystalline Collective is teaching asteroid mining to former enemies. The tree people are spreading their wisdom about long-term thinking. Sarah Chen smiled slightly. It's amazing how cooperative everyone becomes when they can't solve problems by shooting at them. It was true, without the option of military force. The galaxy's species had been forced to find other ways to resolve conflicts. Trade agreements that had been stalled for centuries were suddenly completed in weeks. Territorial disputes were settled through negotiation instead of warfare. Resources were being shared more fairly than ever before. The humans had not done this through force alone. They had made war impossible by simply removing the tools of war. Weapons now refused to function when pointed at other sapient beings. Warships found their engines failing whenever they approached civilian targets. Even harsh words spoken in anger sometimes came out as compliments instead. The children adapt fastest, Sarah Chen continued. The young ones from all species are already learning to work together. They see cooperation as normal because they have never known anything else. Dexville had seen this himself. Schools throughout. The galaxy now included students from multiple species, all learning the same lessons about peaceful coexistence. Children who would have grown up learning to hate each other were instead sharing toys and homework. Do you ever regret it? Thexville asked suddenly. Coming back, I mean? You could have stayed at peace. Sarah Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of 8 centuries of watching and waiting. Every human who returned was given the choice. We could have stayed in the peaceful realm we had found. Most did. But some of us looked at what the galaxy had become and decided we had a responsibility to fix it. She turned to face him directly. Your people say that the strong should rule the weak. But we learned something different during our time beyond. Death the strong exists to protect the weak. The wise exist to guide the foolish. The powerful exist to serve those who have no power. And if the galaxy rebels against your rule, Thexville asked, if we find a way to fight back? Sarah Chen's smile was sad, but patient. Then we will remind you why fighting is unnecessary. But it won't come to that. Each generation that grows up under our guidance will be better than the last. A few hundred years, you won't need us to keep the peace. You'll do it yourselves. She gestured toward the reborn star outside the window. That is the real work. It's not controlling you, but helping you become something better than what you were. Something worthy of the galaxy you live in. A new ship was approaching the station. Dexville checked his scanner and saw it was a Velkin vessel carrying medical supplies to a refugee camp. The small furry species had embraced their new role as healers and helpers, using their natural kindness to aid species that had once looked down on them. The Velkins are thriving, Sarah Chen observed, following his gaze. They were always meant to be caregivers. The old system just never gave them the chance to show it. What happens when you're satisfied with our progress? Zexful asked. Do you leave again? We become part of the galaxy we helped create, Sarah-Chen replied. Some of us will choose to live again as physical beings. Others will remain as guardians watching over the peace we built together. A few will probably choose to explore what lies beyond this galaxy, seeking new places that might need our help. She began to fade again, becoming translucent. But that is many years in the future, Commander. For now, we have work to do. Gardens to tend, children to teach, a galaxy to heal. As she vanished, her final words lingered in the air like a promise. And we have all the time in the universe to do it right. Dexfell remained at the window, watching the reborn star burn with impossible light. Around him, the galaxy continued its transformation from a place of conflict to something resembling paradise. Would take generations to complete. But the humans had shown they could be patient. They had waited 800 years for justice. They could wait a few hundred more for peace in the distance. More dead stars began to glow with new life. Vexfell allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, the galaxy might finally become a place worthy of the dreams its children deserved.